Well, good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
Great. How about yourself?
I was told not to go do farm chores this morning in my white pants since I have a luncheon to go to after this. And I did it anyway, and they are now soaking in my washing machine.
Oh, well, how's Missy, the little lamb?
Baby lamb is downstairs, and she's crying, and she sounds like a combination of Flipper and a human baby.
Oh, well,
so think about that. So this morning we have with us Janelle Shellum. Janelle is a mom in Edmond, and she is really honestly what I personally would call a not only a warrior mom. I mean, that's kind of a given, but she's a very engaged, connected mom. And so many times I've written about the fact that, you know, your kids go to school, they come home in the afternoon, you say, hey, how was your day today? They go, fine. You go, okay, nothing else really good. No, everything was fine. And they go on about their day. And that was all you got out of them. And Janelle is a very engaged mom, and she found out some books that her kids were reading in school. And if you followed Rope for a long time, you know that my first article for the Federalist in 2014 was about the same books, some of the same books that Janelle is going to talk about today. So think about that. That's a problem. Some of the same books. And then some books that were being read by parents in 2 different states. So it was a compilation article about 3 different parents who were complaining about the books their children were being given as literary assignments. Now, I know we've all talked a lot about what's available in the library. That's not what we're talking about today, and Janelle will explain more. But these are books that your teachers are assigning your children. And it's not just happening in Oklahoma. It's happening in all states. And when you see things like that, you have to realize that there's a root, there's a mission, there's some reason for this. And I think it'll be very plain by the time. Go ahead.
These are books that if the sheriff saw an adult sharing these books with a kid on the street, they would be arrested and charged with sex crimes.
And especially online.
Yes.
Yeah, especially online.
Yeah.
Right. Because we talked to the Canadian County Sheriff.
Yes. And then we talked to the whole Oklahoma Sheriff's Association, and they were hopping mad. But nothing seems to be able to happen. Why are adults in schools protected from sex crime laws? I don't understand that.
Yeah. Well, let's bring Janelle in. And Janelle, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I am well.
I forgot to unmute your mic. Oh. We're great, and we are so excited to hear about your presentation.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So do you want to just hop into it, and we'll let you run with it, and we'll ask questions as we can?
Sure. That is you. There we go. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on today. It is an honor to be here. Like you said before, I have spoken with my kids and asked them different questions. When they came home, this started last year for me, and they had a program in school. They do certain books, fall semester, first quarter, second quarter, and third quarter. Edmond Public Schools does literature circles, which is basically, I think the premise itself is just fine. I have no issues with literature circles, but the district had given different options for the kids to choose from. And it's basically so that they can find something that they're interested in. It will help grow their love of reading. All those things are great. The choices, though, that they had given the students were unfamiliar to me. So at the time when my kids said, hey, which one? So I have twins. So they were both in there. So they both said, which one? And I said, well, as of right now, the only book I know that's on this list is A Separate Peace, which I read in high school. So right now, let's pick that one, and then I'll read up on some of these others. That's what started this journey. And the more I read, the more shocked I became at what our kids were expected to read. So this started a campaign, I guess you could say, on my part, to read through all the books that the kids were offered in school and let parents know. Because what I felt like in the resources that were brought to my children and then sent home to me, it was not a realistic picture of what it was, of what the book was actually about. So I just wanted parents to be informed. I want parents to be able to make an informed decision about what their kids can do in school. So
so you're not trying to ban books?
No.
Really?
No, that's a common theme amongst the people who want to kind of keep this stuff hidden. But no, I'm not a book banner. I'm not a book burner. I'm not a Nazi. I've been called a lot of things. But the reality is I just want parents to be informed. I want them to know, because what was coming home was not the full picture. So I looked at it and went, well, that sounds fun. One of the books that, from what I've been told from the district, was one of the most popular, most picked books, was not at all truthful in what they had said the book was about. So their synopsis was different than my synopsis. We'll just say
okay.
that.
So let me just interject here and make sure we understand.
Yes.
So the school was not giving you the full description of what the book actually was. So that was why when you read the book thinking, oh my gosh, this will be fun, you were like, what the what?
Yes.
Because it wasn't what the school had described to you.
Correct. So for one example, one of the 9th grade literature circle choices was They Both Die in the End. The premise, the synopsis that the school sent home, it was, a world where you get a phone call at the beginning of the day at midnight saying you're going to die today. And there's all kinds of programs that you can do to live your best day, knowing that it's going to be your last. So it made it sound so fun and entertaining and exciting, adventurous. And then I read it, and it's about boys being propositioned for sex. It's by older people. It's about 2 boys who decide that they're gay on their last day of life, or one was bisexual, one didn't know. They're grinding on each other, they're kissing. This wasn't mentioned at all in the synopsis. And so I thought, well, this is the story here, and or a big chunk of the story. So I just said, parents have a right to know this. And so that's where it kind of all started. So
again, for those who are listening and watching, none of us are about banning books, and certainly not burning books. My mother was a literature, and so was Julia's.
Yes.
Literature gurus. But if you don't know what your child is reading, it's not right. It's just simply not right. Your right, your responsibility as a parent is to know what is happening to that child, literally at every moment until they're an adult.
And if they didn't think something was wrong with all of that, why didn't they tell the parents that outright? Why weren't they open and honest about it?
Yeah.
If that's
Yeah.
what was in there and they chose not to say that, they know it's bad.
Yeah. So, Janelle, you have a wonderful presentation. So, I am going to let you get on with your presentation. So, and we'll just ask questions as you go.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. This is just about the in-class books. So the ones that our kids are expected to read in school. In class. These aren't the ones in the libraries. So that's a whole nother lane. This is my lane, and this is just what is in there. So I do want to let people know, if there's children listening, there is very offensive language and topics coming ahead.
Wait, stop. You're warning kids, parents, to remove their kids from the room, and these are books that are that kids are having to read.
Yes.
In school.
Okay, yeah. Just thought I'd mention that. Okay, please go ahead.
So here is the hierarchy of EPS. Okay, so the superintendent is Dr. Grunwald. Dr. Rose is over all of curriculum and instruction. And then Jackie Rasnick is over secondary ELA. So secondary is 6 through 12. Elementary, I've looked through their lists. And as far as what's on the website, I have no issues with that. That's all I can do. My kids are in high school. This is where I gravitated towards. So Jackie is who I communicate with. I have spoken with Dr. Rose many times as well, but Jackie is my link to the district. So we've met several times, and she is my first line, I guess you could say. So we've met and discussed. We have a good rapport, and she's been honest through the whole process with me. So I will give kudos where kudos is needed. This is on the website, the district's website. This is the text list, or the reading list for each grade. So again, this is just 6 through 12. So parents can go on there and look to say, what is it my kids are going to be reading this year? Now, this isn't what they're going to pick out from the library. This is the choices that they have in class. So, all the way through from 6 to 12. And then, because there really isn't a rating system for books, I know that the Oklahoma legislature has looked into this a couple times. It hasn't made it through. So basically, I guess what I'm trying to do is show you something that we're familiar with. We're familiar with movie ratings and TV ratings. So that's what I'm relating this to, so that we, in our regular day life, we can kind of understand what these will represent, these books will represent. So I just kind of went through and put in, G, PG, PG-13, all the different guidelines. And this is right off the website from the National Movie FilmRatings.com. So you can go through these. It's all ages. There's more mature themes in PG, but nothing can be no nudity, no vulgar, like over the top profanity. I would equate this to things like the F word. That's not going to be allowed. So here's all the different the ratings. So here is an 8th grade book. It's called A Long Way Down. Excuse me. And it's for 13-year-olds. This whole entire book is about revenge killing. It's you can see the words that are in this book, the very first one. These are 13-year-olds that our school is saying it's perfectly fine for them to read it. They're not allowed to say it at school, but they are allowed to read it at school.
So let me just jump in here about the inconsistencies, because I think that's something we really need to make sure we point out. Number one inconsistency is you can't say this at school. If you're a kid and you say the F word, what's going to happen to you?
I mean, I'm going to make an assumption here that you're going to be sent to the principal's office. You're going to, at least in middle school, and this is a middle school book. I'm sure parents will be called. I mean, honestly, in the
something.
Same, I'm not
sure. Can you imagine if the student said those words to the teacher?
Correct. and they can't write it in their writings, but they can read it. So there's just a lot of.
That's inconsistent.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So this book is about a boy whose brother was killed, and in his world, and in his family, whoever kills your friend or relative, you then go and kill them. So from the moment this book starts, it's talking about guns, and it's talking about revenge killings. And throughout the book, he goes to get on an elevator, and pretty much the 90% of the book takes place in an elevator. So it's within a couple minutes. And each floor he gets on, he's going down to do the killing. Lives on the 6th floor. He's going down each floor, and each floor, somebody from his past or someone who's been killed, whatever, gets on the elevator with him. And it's all these stories of revenge killings. It's stories of, hey, I went and killed somebody and it was the wrong person. Anyway. So then the last floor, they get off, and it leads you to believe that they are going off to do the revenge. The ghost of his brother leads him out to go do the revenge killing on the
my
killed him.
gosh.
So
demons and killing.
So this is 8th grade. This is 13-year-olds, and we're explaining to them about the good of revenge killings.
Let's point out another inconsistency here.
Sure.
And I'm just going to use this term. People who are left of center politically hate guns.
Right.
They can't stand guns. They scream and yell about anybody who is pro Second Amendment, who just wants the ability to have a gun constitutionally, like Constitution allows. And yet the left of center people are the ones that tend to just fall on their sword over and over again for these books, making excuses for them and calling us book banners and book burners because, we're pointing out the inconsistencies here.
Yes.
I mean, is that about accurate or?
Sure. Yeah. It's the whole book burning and book banning thing bothers me because I would never be for banning books. Ever in my life, I have never been for that, nor will I ever be. I believe everyone has a right to write whatever book they want to write. They have every right to publish it. Publishers have every right to do that. That's constitutional. You have a right to do that. What I don't like here is that the district was trying to hide, or what it appeared to be to hide, this from parents and not let them know. And then wants to defend, as you can see on the screen here, this is another book, this language, all the while saying it's not right. You can't do that. You can't say that. You can't write that. So I just have a hard time when so one of the things we teach our kids is it's either right or wrong. It's not one way when you do it and another way when someone else does it.
Right.
So
well, let's point out too, I am noticing that the N word is all over the place in this particular book.
yes.
So does anybody remember that they wanted to ban To Kill a Mockingbird? Does anybody remember that?
Yes, and that was
Why
the ones
did
that
they
are
want to
screaming
ban-
about it now. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Why did they want to ban To Kill a Mockingbird?
because of the
N-word.
N-word.
Yeah. So
So that's
just
interesting.
pointing that out.
Yes. It's
Well-
interesting that you say that, Jenny, because when I went to Jackie, probably the first time, actually, maybe the first time we met, it became apparent. I had read these books and had written up these synopsis. I wrote down, I had every cuss word that was in the book, every topic that's discussed in the book, as well as quotes from the book. And then, I'm not a writer. I'm just a mom. And sometimes I was up till 4 a.m. writing these things because I wanted to finish the book and get it done.
Wow.
But so they're maybe not the best written synopsis, but they at least give you a very real idea of what it is that is in it. So when I went to her and said, everything I'm reading, and this was just freshman that I had done at the time, is very racially charged. And is there any way that we can, everything is black against white or white against black. Is there any way that we can have a book that would be like bringing people together? Can we do that? And I had done some research about other books that were chosen in other school districts around the area. And most school districts around the area, or a lot of them at the time, had To Kill a Mockingbird for freshmen. And so she says, well, what would you suggest? And I said, well, because of this research, I would suggest To Kill a Mockingbird. She says, oh no, we can't do that one. I said, can I ask why? And she says, well, because of the N-word. I said, well, I am not an African American mom or parent of an African American, so I can't speak to that. But what I will tell you is you have the N-word in 3 other books, and she hadn't read them. She didn't know that those words were in them.
Well,
At
and
the time,
the books that have these kind of words and graphic sexual descriptions and all of that, yes, they can write them, but once they provide them to children, they are guilty of sex crimes. So,
and this one does not have sex crimes in it. This one is purely about the language. That I have an issue with, and it's about, and it's a lot of black against white. This is a very racially charged book, but I'm going to tell you, it was astonishing to me that the director of secondary ELA hadn't read the book. She, at the time, Dr. Rose was not in his position. It was Emily Steele, and Emily came into another meeting, and they fully admitted that they had revamped the entire reading list, or I should say a lot of it. I don't know that it was all of it, a lot of it, and were behind and hadn't read them. So I'm not sure how they chose these books. My understanding, based on what they told me, is that teachers meet in the summer. They go over the list. If they don't want to take something off, they all kind of vote. They then recommend books to add to the list, and that's how it's done. My experience has been a little different with that. So someone has to approve these books, and that would be, I'm just using logic. The first step would be Jackie Rasnick, the secondary ELA director. The second step would be Dr. Rose, or at the time Emily Steele, and then it would be the superintendent and the board. Well, none of them had read the books. So I'm wondering who actually made the decision to put these books on. So it was curious.
When I was teaching, I was science. My mom was the English teacher. But when we were teaching, one of the things that I know Mom did, now she read voraciously, so everything, that she taught, she had read. But they would often pull they would say, oh, it's an award-winning book. And they would pull a book off of an awards list, like the Sequoia Medal books, for example.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I first started tackling this issue in 2011, I think all the way back there, if you said something like that, this isn't appropriate, this isn't developmentally appropriate for a child to read, they would say the following thing: well, it's on the Sequoia book list. It's received the Sequoia Medal. So they didn't care what it said in it, so long as it had gotten some kind of an award or a medal. Well, if you look at the American Library Association, they're as left as they can possibly be. And all of these books that are getting awards are not what I would call literary. And that's the other point, Janelle. You love reading.
I do.
Julia and I love reading. Are these literary works? Are they something that, do they have good language? No, and I'm not talking about the ugly language. I'm talking about, is the sentence structured well? Is the English grammar good? Is there anything that you could say that would elevate these books at all? Are they even well written?
That is a great question. And I will say no to most of them. It was interesting this past summer, so almost a year ago, because we had kind of been involved. I have another mom that does kind of goes to the meetings with me, helps us kind of work through things. I kind of just wanted to bring somebody in with me, so I wasn't alone in this, because it can be a lonely place. Yeah. But we found out that the teachers meet in the summertime, so we asked, listen, it might be nice if you were to put somebody on these committees that didn't necessarily agree with you. It might go a long way. So we were allowed graciously to go onto the 10th grade committee this past summer, and I will tell you that there were a few books that basically what happens is the teachers write up their opinions. They go through a form, which this was new this year. My understanding is because, again, there's eyes on this now. There hadn't been before. And so went through, did all that. Everyone just kind of gave, this is what I like about the book. This is what I didn't like about the book. And you just went around the circle, and then you turned in your papers, and that was it as far as what I was allowed to be a part of. Well, there were many teachers that just said, this just isn't a good book. This just isn't a good book. This just isn't a good book. I mean, it was repeated over a few of the books. And so I don't know I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it was added to the list. I don't know who actually chose it and thought it was a good book. And then all these teachers are saying, and they do their own grade. So 10th grade teachers are talking about the 10th grade books. So and these are teachers that come in during the summer, they care about their job, they're doing the extra. I don't know how it got on the list if they all didn't feel like this was a well-written book. So that leads me to who did pick it.
Yeah, and that's a good question. Julia, by the way, lost her internet connection, so we've lost her, but she'll come back on as soon as she can get back on. And I'm going to put her on speakerphone here in a minute, just in case she has some questions. When I read a couple of these books, because when we started looking at some of them, there's and I can't remember what the site is, but you can actually go and pull down big sections of these books without having to order them, or, and I was reading them, and I'm a writer. I'm a paid writer, been a writer for, decades. None of the stuff that I was reading, the grammar was horrible. The sentences were a third grade kid could read them. So when you want to make the argument that, well, okay, so it has some nasty words and maybe it's got sex in it and blah, 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 but it's on the so-and-so list. It's on the Sequoia list, or it has blah. People. These things are written like comic books for third graders. So it doesn't matter if they're in 9th grade or not. These things are horribly written, period. Even if they didn't have all that nasty language, even if they didn't have sexual encounters in them, it wouldn't matter. They're written horribly. They're not going to elevate your child's educational knowledge in one iota.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, Jenny. And also, this particular book, Punching the Air, has no punctuation in it. So
no,
I'm not even kidding. And it is a form of writing. I understand that. But I'm going to tell you, I taught as well, and I hear from other teachers, even currently. I mean, I'm going to tell you, and I taught elementary, but my biggest struggle was getting everyone to use correct punctuation when they wrote capital.
Exactly.
It's basic, but kids just need that repetition over and over again to learn this and to be able to do it effectively and consistently. This was my biggest struggle when we would do writing project is 3 lines under it. That needs to be capitalized, when I was editing. So I just don't know how this would be beneficial when teachers are going to continuously fight that battle, which they are, to be able to just have basic. I mean, think of the way our kids text. They don't use any punctuation.
Nope.
They don't use capitalization. So now in our literature, we're doing this too. So we're just doing the dumbing down of society, I guess, of our children. So there's many different issues I have. That's not just the language or the sexualization or whatever. The writing style is really terrible. And again, that's an opinion. So someone else might find this.
Hold on a second. I'm going to actually argue that point with you. It's not an opinion. So for years, there are books out there that teach you how to write properly and teach, and for those of us who have homeschooled, for example, you get books, that teach you how to write. And my mom, when she was teaching, she was a 32-year teacher of English and taught gifted and talented for a long time. She would diagram sentences. She would do punctuation. There are rules. There are English rules, but the problem is we quit diagramming sentences because they were too hard, and parents got mad because their kids couldn't understand them and they didn't want to deal with it. So much of this is parents' fault. It really is, because they try to protect their kids from things, and it causes a child to grow zero amount.
Mhm.
And,
Well, I
you
would
know, it was
argue
the
on
same thing with spelling. You know,
Oh.
we quit doing spelling because, well, I don't have time to sit down and do a spelling list with my kid every week. And, you know, parents would complain about spelling. So this is where we are. You can have an opinion that maybe this book is, you know, a good book, but your opinion can't be that it's a well-written book.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. You know, I just, I think back to my childhood and then even my kids. And I had one of my children was a reader from, you know, 2, you know, I mean, like just took to it super fast. Not
Yeah.
really. But, and another one was, it struggled. And the first grade teacher went back to the basics. And I mean basics. Here's the phonics rules. Let's use a red pen, and we're going to do all these things. That child now is a fabulous reader, and later on struggled in English. Had a very difficult 6th grade English teacher, and now it is doing very well in English because it's the hard teachers. It's the ones that demand, and this is probably just off topic, but I respect the fact that teachers say, this is hard. We're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that those teachers aren't out there, because they are. My kids had them. But I just think sometimes, you know, from high ups down, let's just, you know, because the teachers didn't make this choice. The district made this choice. So I'm not bashing teachers. That's been something said too. The teachers didn't choose the reading list. You know, the district has the final say in it. And so this is the district that's done this. So I also think, you know, teachers can get a little scared, you know, when they want to have, you know, or when I want to talk to them or something like that. I'm not a mean person at all. This wasn't their decision.
That's a good point too.
You know,
sometimes teachers get back to. Did you hear Julia?
No, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got her on speakerphone since her internet's down. She said, but if you were a teacher, you know, what would you do? And so there are 2 sets of points here. If you're a teacher, and I know you can be scared for your job, and, you know, and that's really difficult. So you're afraid to speak up because you're afraid for your job, or, you know, whatever. But the only problem is if teachers don't speak up and say, this isn't appropriate. I'm not reading 13-year-old kids, or I'm not going to assign 13-year-old kids something that says all of the words, because you can't even read them or we'll get cut off of Rumble. If all of the words that are here, you know, and if they were to stand up and say, I'm not doing this, maybe other teachers would come in behind and say, I'm not doing it. As it is, we have a bunch of people who are scared of their administration, scared to speak out because they need their job or want to keep their job or whatever. So it's bad.
It's real. It is very real. We've seen record numbers of teachers leaving Edmond. They are in a very big staff shortage, because a lot of the ones that were either could retire or just said, I'm getting out because there's no way this is going to get better. They've done that. They've gotten out. I respect them. I respect the teachers. They are in a difficult position. I don't think there's a one size fits all answer for them. What I do think is, you know, just like I put myself in this category, I failed my children as a parent because I didn't know this was going on. I was involved. I was always volunteering at school. I was an involved parent, and I didn't know this was happening until the 3rd quarter of freshman year. So I put myself in the same category. Parents have failed children because we haven't stood up and said no. No.
Well, let me say something like that.
Time, teacher, like district managers, district personnel, principals, they failed teachers as well, saying that, you know, because the teachers are terrified. I've talked to many, and they are terrified to say anything. They're terrified to speak what they truly believe because they'll be ostracized and eventually moved to a school they don't want. Or, I mean, there's going to be retaliation. And so I feel for them, and I don't think there's a one answer for everybody, but I do feel like at some point we all have to stand up and say, how far are we going to let this go?
Well, and I think that's a good point, because what I was going to say was my kids did actually go to public school, the third oldest daughter until third grade, for third grade. And the that daughter particularly, especially in third grade, she was bringing home assignments because I made them empty out all of their,
Yep.
I went through every single
Yep.
book thing in their bag. So she would have stuff that was in there that was, we were already talking about global warming. Scare tactic stuff. If we don't do something about this, then lions are going to die, or, whatever. I don't remember. I actually wrote about it. It's on our earlier blog, that particular assignment, as a matter of fact. So she's 21 now. So think about how long ago that was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my husband and I made an appointment to go talk to the teacher, and we brought in several of these assignments that we just thought, you know what, this isn't teaching. It's you telling my kid what to think, kind of a thing, through an assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And we laid them all out for her and said, here's the problem we have for this. This is not okay. We need different assignments or something. But this isn't okay. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, Mr. and Mrs. White. This is just what we're doing now. So she wouldn't do anything about it. So I go to the principal. Well, did you realize that Mrs. So-and-so has this in their class? Well, but that's Mrs. So-and-so, and her classroom is hers. And if that's the way she wants to do it. So there's never, ever. That's the problem. That's why parents get so, I think, finally just go, screw it. Because there's never any accountability anywhere. And no matter how hard they knock on doors, no matter how, and you followed the chain of command, Janelle, you didn't just cry and complain and gripe. You followed the chain of command. You worked with your school to make this happen. And we need to finish the rest of your program so you can see, everybody can see where you are now. But I know that, as a parent too, it's frustrating because it feels like even when you do stand up, nothing happens.
Yes. And that's been a lot. We were able, we were talking about the ninth grade books and how the N-word is in them. They did go ahead, and this was before Christmas of last year. Not this past Christmas, the one before. And they agreed to To Kill a Mockingbird in. So we've had a relationship, and we've been respectful. We've never been dishonoring to them. Jackie's been very kind to us, and very, she's never negative towards us. But they did they allowed the kids to re-choose their books. And so that was a good thing.
Yes.
But and so again, kudos where kudos belongs. But then later on, we seem to double down on other things. So I'll go through. This is that they both die in the end, and this is the language, or not they both die in the end. This is All American Boys. This one again is a white cop, black boy. And this is basically, I had to shrink this down, but this is like an 8.5 by 11 on font 12 or 12, I think, 8.5 by 11 a sheet of paper of all the cuss words in this book. So it was a lot, and they're all in there. I don't think there's a single one that's not listed there. So there's that one. We have They Both Die in the End. This is the one about the two boys. Yeah, that one was a shocker to me. This is just the language. So this is the summary. I posted on here what it is that the district sent home. This is what they wrote. And then this is what I wrote. And so you can go through and read this and realize
they're close.
They're not close. So I just felt like there was a lot of half truths, because what they said in their synopsis is correct. They just left out a lot of things too. So you can't say that it's not true, because it is. But if you're not telling the whole truth, how much of it is, how much can you trust? And that's right. We're just, as parents, we just want to be able to trust our district to be able to give us all the information, be transparent, and then let us make the decision. That's it. That's what this whole thing has been about. Of course, we'd like different books, and we're going to continue to ask for that. And I have gone through, this process that I go through, I've done it for I didn't do 12th grade, but for all the books that they read. I've done it for 6 through 11. And then I've also done many more for suggestions for different books. Of course, which none of them are, I'm sure they go right into the circular file. They don't really probably care much about what Janelle Shellum thinks the kids should be reading. But this one, excuse me, this is 10th grade. So 10th grade changes a bit in Edmond. They actually give you because of this book, actually, they give you an option to opt out of the regular English class and do an alternate English class. And the alternate is the same in every way, except they don't read this book, because there was so much backlash from parents about this book. And this is not this year. This has been for years.
That's what, in this particular book was the one that I wrote about in the Federalist article in 14,
Yes.
was this specific book, and the mom in Edmond who, and by the way, back then they wouldn't even let her have an alternative book. And what they did is they made the kid go sit in the library for the hour they talked about the book. Now, if you want to call attention to equality under the law in schools, that ain't it, bud. That's just not it. You cannot treat my kid differently because I, as a parent, don't want him to read all of the words that are on this particular, because back when my kids were 15, if they said this, they literally got their mouth washed out.
Yeah. No, this book has been controversial in EPS for a long time. And I will tell you,
and yet they still do it.
And they still do it. And I think that's the part that is, that's the part that I find hard. Hey, maybe she's mad.
Sorry.
This is the part that I find so, I don't understand. It's difficult for me to understand if there is so much backlash that you have to create a whole different class for a teacher to prepare for. Why are we fighting so hard for this book? There are plenty of others. Plenty. So this book, so they obviously every grade has different standards that they have to teach for every class, every grade. And this one is specific to a memoir of sorts. So a firsthand account. They need to be able to read this, dissect it, comprehend it, all the things. Wonderful. So glad the standard's in there. I have no issues with the standard. What I have a problem with is the book that they chose to do this. Now, this book caused a lot of conversations amongst us in the district. And even Dr. Grunwald weighed in an email with me saying that it was, before she became superintendent, she was in Dr. Rose's position as director of curriculum instruction. So she was the gateway, I believe that was her word, to what was used and what was not. And she said it was a delicate balance. And so
there's so many great books out there. Why is there a delicate balance on what kids can and cannot? Go get a good book.
Yeah. She fought hard for this book. She fought very hard for this book. And she wants this book. She wants it. So you can see the different words on this one, but then also there's quotes from it as well. And it's a lot. It's a lot. There's, Jeanette has an attempted rape on her and how she has to feel his penis, and she knew what it was, but although she'd never seen one before, and her dad prostituted her, sent her off to distract, basically. And bless this woman's heart for living this life. No one has an issue with that. It's terrible. I'm so glad she wrote the book. I just don't think 15-year-olds need to read it. That's it. I've read the book. I think it's a good book for my age, but I do not believe that 15-year-olds need to be reading about this and the trauma that this can bring up. We want to talk about kids and their mental health. If somebody's had a sexual assault, this is just going to bring back a lot of things. So they can talk about a lot of things, but I'm not sure they actually follow their own rules sometimes. But
yeah,
this book is The Kite Runner. This is also in the regular English class for 10th grade. This book, the language isn't an issue necessarily in this book. It is, and the writing style is good. But I'm going to tell you, it is a dark book. I mean, I don't usually buy the books that I read. I usually just rent them or check them out from the library or whatever. I don't want to own a lot of these books, but at the same time, I it was too long of a wait for me, so I did have to go buy this book, and I burned it. It was so I didn't really burn it. I threw it out. I'm not going to say I burned it because I didn't, but I did throw this book out. I didn't even give it away. I threw it in the trash. This book was so dark, and it is about a 12-year-old boy raping another boy. It describes it in detail. That boy then later in life has a son, and the boy who raped the father ends up having the son in sexual slavery. He tries to commit suicide. You read about, and it was in Afghanistan before the Taliban, and then during the Taliban, and it is so dark. All the evil that is, I mean, it's not even just tucked in. The evil's not even just tucked in through this book. It is throughout the entire book. I had to take a break from reading books after this book because I had to just, I told my husband, I said, if I can just wash my brain, I just need to wash my brain after reading this book.
Jenny,
I'm
can't
sorry,
hear you.
There you go.
A second.
Oh, there you go. I hear you.
Okay. So I just need to make a point here. How many times have we been told that kids are committing suicide in record numbers, and they're so sad and depressed, and we have to bring all these counselors in to counsel these kids because they're having such a tough time. So who's causing that tough time? You're going to make them wear masks. You're going to make the kids feel like pariahs. You're going to make them feel like they need to get vaccinated for a disease, like we just heard Michael and Emily talk about as they won their lawsuit against Edmond Public Schools.
Pit them against one another for
race,
plethora of reasons. Race.
You're going to make them read something that an adult woman found dark. An adult woman.
And I'm going to tell you, it tells them how to commit suicide in this.
What?
Yeah, it tells them what he did. This is my thing is it doesn't even match up with what it is that they're saying. We need to hire, EPS hired 9 new counselors. Why? Well, because our kids are struggling. Okay.
Well,
so why would we give them something that would get? So I had, I told you I had written a few suggestions. Synopsis is the language, the top. I did all of it, the quotes, just like I did for all the others. I did and I gave it over. One of them was The Hiding Place. It is one of my favorite books of all time, and it is the story of Corrie ten Boom during the war. She helped hide Jews. She was not a Jew herself, and she said, "These are lives." And the quote from that book that I go back to all the time when it comes to this topic is, and I won't be able to say it exactly, but I will summarize. Her father and her were on a train, and he was a clockmaker, and so every month or whatever, he'd go and make sure that his clock was on the right time. So he'd have to travel by train. He'd pick up supplies and he'd come back. Well, she went with him, and he had a suitcase full of supplies, and it was very heavy. And she had asked him what sex sin was, which is, sex at the time. That's what it was called. And so she was 10. And he said, he was quiet. And then the train stopped, and he says, "Corrie, pick up that suitcase." And she says, she tried and tried. And she says, "I can't, it's too heavy." And he said, "Knowledge is just like that. I will carry it until you are ready. Until then, until you are ready, let me carry the load for you." And I believe that speaks so much to this, that we are requiring our children to read adult books. I didn't find this, when I had to go buy this book, I didn't find it in the young adult section. It was in the adult section at Barnes & Noble. This is not young adult reading. This is adult reading. And we are expecting 15-year-olds who can't drive, who can't sign a legal document, who can't, anything, be able to take this heaviness and process that when their brains aren't nearly fully developed. They can't even make a rational thought. Boys are just so impulsive. I don't know.
It's traumatic for them.
It's traumatic. I do agree with that. And so I just believe that while some people might find this a very good book, I personally did not enjoy it one bit. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. What I don't think is that our kids are ready to handle these heavy topics. And you can say, and I will tell you, this is so interesting. My son at the beginning of last school year was quarantined. It was, the 2 days on, 3 days off cycle. And we had to go get tested at the school site. So we got called in. I was sitting there waiting. And this woman came in, was very upset about the whole thing. And Randy Decker happened to be in there at the time. And the woman was rude. There's no question. And so she left, and Mr. Decker, spoke to the staff, and then he turned to me and I said, I agree that, that these people did not deserve that talk, but you can understand a little bit of where she's coming from. And he goes, no, actually I can't. And I said, okay. Well, everyone's frustrated with this, and there's a lot of we don't understand why when other things are different. And I said, there are kids. And he says, no, they're not. And it took me aback for a second. And he says, no, that ended when schools 100 years ago started transporting and feeding the children.
And I always said,
it was Randy Deckard.
What's that?
Who is this person?
So he works at the Edmond. He's the human resources, I believe, representative for the district. So I was shocked when I heard that. And I just thought, what?
Well,
so
you know what?
It opened my eyes to a lot of things.
It does make a lot of sense. And, Julie and I have talked about this very same thing for years and years and years. And it is true. And you said this earlier on, Janelle, when you don't push back, they take ground, right?
Yes.
Which is essentially what you said. And I really do believe that these people are, isn't it Lenin who said that, give me your child and, I'll change the world, or, something like that. I mean, I really do believe that these people actually believe that they're their children. We had a long story, very short. Julia posted something on our Facebook page the other day, and it caused poop storm. And a lot of the people that were commenting about what she posted were basically saying, we'll do whatever we want. Thank you very much. And it, like Julia has my favorite saying of all times, when people say, or schools will say, well, we don't think that way, or we're not doing that.
Yeah.
What do you say?
I say, we're not doing that, and you can't stop us. That's always their mantra. We're not doing that. And then the next thing out of their mouth is, you can't make us stop. And it's like, okay, so you're not doing that, and we can't stop you. Got it.
Well, Janelle.
Okay.
Janelle, we've got not a whole lot of time left, and I really want to see more of your program. So we'll be quiet now.
Okay. So this one is the 57 bus. This is also 10th grade, 15-year-olds. There's a few words in this. Obviously, there's some bad ones, but this one is about a transgender, a boy transitioning to a girl. And what I find disturbing, and I had to review this book when I did the summer program last summer, and I'll tell you what my biggest concern is I don't know if you guys remember, but earlier there was TikTok challenges about taking soap out of the bathrooms and tearing urinals off the wall, all the things. And my biggest concern is that, so what happens is a boy, and again, it's racial, it's a black boy doing this to a white transitioned girl. And he lit her skirt on fire. And my biggest fear was, we're going to put this idea into 15-year-old boys' minds, girls' minds, whatever. And I don't think that this is a good idea. I don't think we need to give them ideas. Now, again, parents can have their kids read whatever they want them to read. This is not about parents' rights, as far as what you can have your child read. I can have my child read anything that I want them to read. Somebody else can do the same. This is in school.
But not on our tax dollars.
Right.
See, that's the difference.
No. Parents can go to jail for exposing their children to things they shouldn't be exposed to.
Right, exactly.
Their children taken away.
Yeah.
So that's not exactly accurate.
Right. And I copied this directly from the book. And so I didn't know what a lot of these terms were. So the kids are learning this in the book.
Romantic.
I had no idea. I know. So, they're getting an education for sure. And then this one, a long way. This one's tough.
A Long Way Gone. That's what it's called.
Yeah, it's a true story about Africa, and it is gruesome.
Oh, no. Yeah,
it is gruesome, and it's about a boy who was taken. He had to become a soldier. His story is heart-wrenching. But I'm going to tell you, it is gruesome. There are details of him slitting throats, and it's just. They give all the details. I'll just tell you that. They give all the details.
Let me say something as a writer, and I made this point one time in an article that I wrote, and nobody's been able to. None of these people who are apologists for this garbage at this age have ever been able to refute that comment, and that is, their argument is that kids see worse than this on the internet, or kids need to know. This is a big world, and we need to educate kids about what really happens. Okay, if you want to play that game, let me play this game back with you. So instead of some of the stuff that's on here, which is going to cause even in 16-year-olds thoughts that they can't get out of their head, ways of thinking about things that would never have been introduced had this information never been introduced. There is a whole different way of writing where you don't get graphic like you do, but you still convey the same thought.
Yes.
You could describe somebody slitting somebody else's throat, but you can also not describe that and just say, this person died. Or, there are ways. If the person is writing in this particular graphic style form, there's a reason for that. If they want to convey an idea, there's a different way to do that. This is specifically meant to upset, to make people think to traumatize, to make people think in a different way. So BS on all of those other arguments. They're just specious arguments that mean absolutely nothing and are just apologists for this kind of nonsense.
Well, and I think the author, this is his story, and I do believe that he can write this because this is real to his life.
Sure.
And for an adult to read it, I was even like, oh my goodness, this is hard to read. But again, our 15-year-olds don't need to be reading this. This Correct. This is, again, I think he's every right to read it. And I think it really does show you what he went through. I just don't think kids need to be reading this. It really comes down. And that's my choice as my parent. But I agree with what you're saying as far as they always say, hey, they see worse. Well, my kids don't. Like my kids' technology is locked down. I go through their stuff. I do all the things as a parent that I can do to protect it because they are in a safe space here at home. One of my kids doesn't even have internet on his phone. Like, it's one of those things for now, because that's what he needs right now. And things change and things go through. But I'm going to tell you, the excuse of, well, they see worse at school or they hear worse at school. So now that gives us a reason. And they want to talk about, bullies are bad and you've got to be nice to everybody. And I was like, but I'm going to tell you, they haven't been nice to me. It's a one-sided, I have to be nice, which I have always been respectful. And it's never been about, you can't do this. It's about giving the parents the full amount of information and letting the parent make the decision. That's all this has ever been about. And anyway, but I find it interesting that they want to bully, me or those that disagree. But anyway, so this book I felt like I was on acid when I was reading this book. It is weird. It is, again, just not my style, which is fine. But man, there are some just, suicide. The mom commits suicide and it goes through all there's a lot. Anyway. Okay. So this one is interesting. It talks about how she can't even masturbate because her mom might stop in. Her sister's the perfect Mexican daughter, and she was having an affair with a married man and got pregnant. And it talks about girls touching each other's boobs. And there's all kinds of stuff in this one. I'm going to keep going, although it is in here, and you can find all of this. I'll have a QR code that people can look at where they can find all of this information. This one is sexualized. We literally read about her having her first sexual experience and all her thoughts while it's happening and where he's touching her and all these things. We also read about her having oral sex performed on her. Yeah, I can't even. This one is a definite no. So after all of this information, after we, talked about this, and this kind of became a hot topic during the school board meeting, school board elections, this year, this school year, they have put out novel rationales. This is their reasoning as to why they've chosen them. So this is on the district website. This is the one that I just showed. This is what they said. If you look down at the bottom, what does that last line say?
References to
thought-provoking and educational novel.
Okay, what down here at the second page? What is it's a small on my screen. I can't.
Yeah, it says references to teen sexuality.
Okay, so it doesn't say they're having oral sex. We talk about condoms, use condoms everywhere. We talk about pedia, and talking about I can't even. It's all written down. You can look at it. To me, teen sexuality. If they're going to reference teen sexuality, I'm like, okay, they're going to talk about, a friend is having sex. Not literally in the mind of the person who's having sex, not how they're shirtless making out and the mom comes in, not how, making out in the back. Anyway, there's a lot. And so I just, again, even though they did the rationale, I don't feel like it shows the whole picture. And so half truth, this is the state statute on,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so they've written it, very vague. And so it's contemporary standards. It violates contemporary standards. Well, what is that anymore? Oh. So, we've wanted to do a lot of things and we can't because it's too vague. Nobody.
Well, some of it's pretty specific.
Yes, but it's up against today's contemporary standard. So it can be argued any which way. So
and that's the problem.
The legislature, this is what they've chosen to do. Instead of protecting kids, they've chosen to make it so vague that, hey, we did something, but there's actually nothing that is done.
Right.
So,
as usual.
Yeah.
As usual.
So again, this is the statute displaying them. So this is per offense. So each time a student was given a book and each time they read it in class, a separate offense. So it would be enormous for the school.
They would go to jail for a long, long time.
Well, if anybody was willing to follow the law. Yeah, and again, like Janelle said, the legislature has done nothing to help us on this. So while they scream about how they want to empower parents, the things that they could actually do to empower parents, they didn't do this year.
No, they did not.
Just saying.
No, they did not. So this is my school board member. And when she was running for re-election a couple years ago, or excuse me, no, this was last year's school, but she wasn't running for re-election, but she had posted this on her re-election Facebook page and said that basically we are immoral. And it's a group of parents that are we're immoral. And so I don't really like to get into things, but I scratched out names to protect people because not all of them are me. And I just want, when I did respond, I was like, I just want to make sure. So when we want to protect our kids and we don't want them to read bad words and about sex and all this, things, we're immoral. And so then her, you can read her responses. So and she said that, in her, and I'm going to go back for a second. Wrong way, sorry. Here it says she has to represent all, over here on the left side, all students. And I don't think she's representing my kids.
Well, and it says honor divergent opinions, but then flip to the next slide.
But then
it says right here, we must agree to disagree. So wait a minute, you're supposed to honor divergent opinions, but we must agree to disagree. Everything that you said in your presentation, Janelle, indicates to me that Edmond Public Schools has no idea what they're doing. They fly by the seat of their pants and do whatever they want. Everything that you've said is so inconsistent. They say one thing, they'll say another thing. They say one thing, they do another thing. It's just completely inconsistent. It's whatever they want to do.
And everything I'm telling you is just fact-based. I am not emotional about this. It is, I mean, I am with my kids because they're my children and I will go into mama bear mode, but these are just facts. This is what it is. And so I spoke at OakPack on this, and OakPack actually stopped me because people were so offended because I wasn't saying these words. It was just on the screen. And they wanted to say that these weren't in, and I just thought, well, it's here. People have just buried our heads in the sand and said, it happens in California. It happens in New York. It doesn't happen here.
So OPEC thought that you were making this up essentially.
Well, they did ask me to stop because people were offended. And I'd given 2 warnings at the beginning of this presentation. I said, if this is offensive, you may want to leave. I had 2 slides like that. And I tried to warn people, this is offensive. But our kids don't get to, walk out of the room. Our kids have to sit and read this and be exposed to this and talk about it in class. They don't get to get up and walk out. So you can go out and you can feel better about yourself that you haven't, you haven't heard these words. Your virgin ears haven't heard them. But I'm going to tell you, our kids can't do that. And we can't stick our head in the sand anymore and say, well, it's not here, or, well, it's not happening at my school. It is. And if we're going to stand up and protect our kids, it is time that we enter into this discussion. It is not a fight. It is not us against them. It is a discussion to say, where can we find common ground? Where can we find a book that is challenging, a book that represents different points of view, which I have no problem with. But when you pit 2 people against each other, that is not helping our children. We have fights breaking out in school. We have, them and us in this country. And what are we doing to make our kids better? What are we doing to say, we're going to do better than this. We are better than this. And we can show that there are other opportunities, other ways to handle these things. I don't see that these books are doing that. That's an opinion I have. Although, board president Cynthia Benson, she thought they were all just fine. She, when asked at a school board meeting, has anyone read these? I didn't ask that. She raised her hand and was, yeah, they're fine. So that's on tape. She campaigned this past year on support of these books. So she's all for it. Marcus Jones was in support of all of these books. He had no problem, although personally, he had said some other things to me. So, but if you're...
Oh gosh, inconsistency. How shocking.
Yeah. So this is the website that we started. It's called edmonddidyouknow.com. You can scan the QR code there. It takes you to... first, there's also a section on the lawsuit that Emily and Michael talked about. Just for a little bit of inside information on that, They are asking the Supreme Court for a rehearing on that. So they are again using our tax money to go. They've been ruled against over and over again, and they are now again trying to fight to discriminate and keep our kids out of school. So, but this is about, so that's on there as well, the details of that. Again, all facts. There is no emotion. It is all facts. And these are the books. You make the decision on what your kids, what you want your kid to read. But here is a realistic summary of all of them. So this is that hiding place quote that I love so much. And it just says it all to me. It says it all. So I appreciate you having me on today. I appreciate the conversation. We're not a bunch of book banners. We just want informed consent. We want, instead of my dream would be for parents to have to opt in to the Glass Castle and the Kite Runner versus having to opt out of it. Because parents at the end of the year may have 4 kids. They're getting 100 different emails. It just gets lost. But if you have to opt in and you really want this, you're going to go do this. Otherwise, I don't think parents are informed. And so they count on that. And
there's no reason to have these books in schools at all. No reason. So, I mean, if parents want to find them somewhere else, that's still wrong. That's still wrong. But there is no reason to have these books in school at all.
It's the in school part that is the controversial part. You want to read these books at home, you want to check them out, you go right ahead. I am not going to tell you how to parent, but I also don't want you to tell me how to parent, and that I should just let my kid read this. Well, that's the
key.
Yeah.
That's the key. So you can't call me a book burner or book banner or whatever, and you can't tell me I'm not for these books and then, tell my kid that they have to read them, because that's absolutely completely opposite of your thesis. So you want the books and I have to have them too. Well, no, but wait. I'm paying for this stuff. Even when my kids aren't enrolled in that school, I'm paying for this stuff.
Right.
And I don't want this stuff there. So again, I don't care if you're, 21, if you're 18 and you want to read these books, whatever.
If you can't read it in the news, you can't have it in the school.
Yeah.
Well, and
period.
I'll tell you, a lot of teachers, I don't want to say a lot, I will say some, because I know of some, are actually doing the audio version in their classroom.
Oh, no.
And so the kids are hearing these words, not just reading them and but actually hearing them and
literally polluting their
classroom.
Oh, literally polluting their minds.
Yeah. So, that's okay. But also, I just think parents need to be awake, and just know what's happening, which is why we started this website. I will say that enrollment has already happened for EPS back in February, and February, March. It was February at least. And when I emailed Jackie Rasnick about the book list for next year, because they've already done the enrollment. So parents need to know if they've, what they're opting out of or what it is that they're going to be reading so they can choose which class. They don't know what next year's books are going to be.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
So they won't know until around July is what she told me. So how do you know what you're opting out of? How do you know what you're opting into? Like, this is, if the list isn't even correct. So those parents that have, already filled out enrollment forms for English, I don't know what you're reading. I'll continue. Whatever changes I will read and I will put on the website. That will be done, but I won't have, I may not have it done before school starts because we won't know until the, mid to late summer.
Well, Michael just chimed in a second ago when we were talking. He's watching, and he chimed in and he said, Lenin is the one that said, give me one generation of your children and I'll transform your country.
Yeah.
And then he said, give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. And then he also said, destroy the family, you destroy the country.
Mhm.
The way to crush the bourgeoisie is to grind them between the millstones of taxation and inflation. And for those of you who do not know, the middle class is basically the bourgeoisie. And if you are not paying attention, please understand that the fight is not against, not to help the poor, not to help the rich. It's to squash the middle. So I think it's important to make that point. Janelle, I know we've gone over a little bit today, which
sorry.
no, oh,
Our
please.
fault.
No, absolutely. Here's the thing, parents. Janelle works extremely, and that's a lot of reading to do. I mean, even when you do like to read, that's a lot of reading to do. Janelle does this for you. If you don't take advantage of what she's doing, I'm not sure you're a parent, really. I mean, a parent is somebody who manages their child and their child's upbringing. And you, in order to be a parent, you have to know how the child is being brought up. And if they're away from you 7 hours of the day, how do you know, unless you are somebody like Janelle, who is completely or as completely as possible anyway, submersed in her children's lives. So,
I would also like to add to that, to our state representatives and senators that have not bothered to read any of these books, the fact that they are questioning parents that have jumped into this fray, like parents wanted to find this, I call on you right now to sit down and listen to Janelle's presentation, to sit down and with parents that have done this investigation and this to listen to the parents. You don't work for the schools. You got elected by your entire tax base and all of the people, but the fact that some of our representatives that are on the education committees are questioning these parents is outrageous, and I'm outraged. You might get done.
well,
But
and
you need to listen.
so Rhonda wrote in this morning, our children are being transformed. I see it. I have 21 years working for public schools and I see it. I removed my own child from what I saw happening and what he was being exposed to. And I'll back up and say it again. I mean, I taught from, let's see, the late 1980s through the early 2000s. And just what I saw in my 10 years basically of teaching, was a huge shift. And just think about how long ago that was. That was a huge shift. What parents, you can educate your own kids too. Let me just make that point again. It's getting easier by the day. The internet is a wonderful place for being able to do that and finding information on that. We do have a whole hour devoted actually to starting homeschooling with Jana Belcher from the Constitutional Homeschoolers Association. I probably didn't say that right, but she will be on. Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, she'll be on upcoming here in the next couple of weeks. So, parents engage. And Janelle, we can't thank you enough.
Yes.
For what you're doing. It's a flat public service, and God bless you for doing what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate you guys letting me come on here and share all the information. The more ways we can get this into parents' hands, the more we all win. So it's
and that's another thing. We need to share this video far and wide so that your presentation can get out and everybody can actually read what's on there instead of just arguing about air because they don't know what's in it. So, anybody who's watching this, please share. Janelle, you share. Will share. And let's get your information out.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And Janelle, we hope to talk to you soon. And give your website one more time, please.
EdmondDidYouKnow.com.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care, Janelle. We will talk to you soon. And may God bless you.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Julia.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was quite the program, and I know we're a little late
And
today.
we know all this information already, and it's still, I see it, and it just sends me through the roof. I cannot believe that adults, that some of them call themselves Christians, that adults would think any of this is a good idea to have
Yeah.
this crap in schools. It
Yeah.
is outrageous. Outrageous.
And again, if you want to read it as an adult, I mean, read it. We're not trying to keep you from reading anything, but
if you
adults
wanna
and
give it to
children are
kids,
not the
Stay away from
same.
kids.
Yeah, it's
They need to, yeah.
okay. Well, Julia, Friday, I will see you again, and we will be talking to Dr. Craig Evans,
Yes.
who's going to talk a little bit about some of the sexualization issues that we're seeing in schools today. So you'll want to tune in for that.
Yet
Again,
another
we're
great
live.
asset in Oklahoma.
And say again.
Evans. I said Dr. Evans is yet another great asset in Oklahoma that no one seems to know about.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Julia, we will see you again on Friday. And thank you to everybody who watched, and have a wonderful day.